you. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me for wherever you are in the world today. I know I've got people that have signed up for this from all over. And so, what's going to be happening today is I'm going to be sharing with you just various concepts, theories, and then we're going to be going through some simple practices around some of these ideas on how we can move beyond conventional approaches to sustainability towards a deeper, more holistic understandings that we can integrate, whether you're in the creative fields or whether you're a scholar, researcher, and just your general life. And so I invite you today to be curious, be open, but also just use your self sovereignty and take what resonates and leave the rest behind. So it's all of this is an invitation. Again, we are um, going to be going through various concepts and ideas for approximately 90 minutes. Again, if you have to jump off, that's totally fine. I will send you a recording. This also isn't a linear workshop, so it might seem like we're jumping around and going in circles, and that's the point. That's just how we're going to roll today. There'll be some time at the end for questions. So leave those to the end and please use the chat as well. I will get to it throughout. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm really good. So sorry for being late, just trying to finish
Oh,
up things.
all good. All good. We're just beginning. Thank you for joining us
Nice to see you, Anya.
in New Zealand. Yeah, you too. Okay, so um, just want to begin by acknowledging the lands that I'm on today and acknowledging all of the lands that you're on today, and as well as everyone watching the recording. So, place the earth holds us all, and without her, we wouldn't be able to gather today. And at the moment, I'm in the United States and I'm on the Ramaytush Ochlone um, tribal land, which otherwise known as San Francisco. And so deeply acknowledging these colonized lands and the knowledge and the caretaking that has been happening for thousands of years. Okay, so just to begin, who am I? I know some of you here, some of you I don't. So I wanted to give a little introduction as to who I am and why I'm sharing this work today. So I originally trained in fashion and textiles many years ago, and it was always my dream to work in the fashion industry. And so after I finished my undergrad, I did the very kind of took the very preordained path, and I went and worked at Vivienne Westwood in London. I was managing this high-end showroom in Paris for a few years where we were selling to the best boutiques in the world. And I always felt this connection to fashion and textiles and craft and artisans. And I couldn't really pinpoint what it was until recently. And I started seeing how much of the industry was functioning in a way that really wasn't aligning with my values. And so I started questioning it, and I was starting to question different aspects of society, my personal life. And so this kind of just rolled out into my fashion work. And I ended up leaving those jobs and feeling quite disillusioned and feeling like something was missing. And I managed production for a few labels in Byron Bay in Australia on the Eastern Coast. And then I decided to just start learning about sustainability online by myself because at the time there was no programs or courses in Australia that could teach me. And that led me working with a social enterprise in India, which was like a non-for-profit run by women for women. They were producing for various brands in Australia, and I was working with them and also running my own small, independent, sustainable label. And still, after doing this, I felt like something was missing. And I just felt like there was a deeper calling for me. So I went to London and I studied my master's in fashion futures at the London College of Fashion. And that really opened up my perspective because it was the first time that I was able to really start connecting these very disparate fields, or what we've been told is separate, to fashion. So, fashion with ecology, with spirituality, with economics, with society, um, with the body, and so on and so on. And so that led me to working in academia back in Sydney for several years, teaching and also studying a PhD, which I've just finished. And so my PhD revolved around this idea of pluriversality and looking at how we can create a more expansive connection to what sustainability is. So I was feeling really frustrated at the time going to a lot of sustainability conferences, feeling like they were very corporate, that they were really missing like the heart element and the spirit element, and as well as joy, vitality, and pleasure and beauty. So my PhD was about how can we actually reconnect to these elements in a holistic way and bring that into what we're creating. And so my background is in fashion, textiles, and design, but I believe a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is transferable to many fields. Um, so now that that my PhD is over, I've actually left the academic world. And so what I am doing now is creating spaces for education, like this workshop, that sit outside of the academic space, that's open for everyone, where we can explore these more expansive, deeper ways of engaging with sustainability. So, so I would love to know, before I delve into more about these concepts, what does sustainability mean to you and what brings you here today? Love to know in the chat. Got a small group, so yeah, what does sustainability mean to you and what brings you here today? Mm. So Liv says regeneration, out with the single use and in with cyclical practices that minimize waste. Great. Thanks for sharing, Liv. Anastasia says keeping the planet thriving and livable for next generations. Awesome. Jamie says the ability to keep going with what we already have and limiting newness as the norm. I love that. Lana says a sensitive and respectful way of living and creating that endures. Integrative and collaborative, thoughtful, conscious problem solving. Beautiful. Sarah says the meaning is ever evolving for me. Hard to put into words. I can relate to that. deeply relational. It means recognizing multiple ways of knowing and being, embracing pluriversal worldviews more than human perspectives. Amazing. Mm. Thank you for sharing, everyone. It's great to read these. So, show my screen again. So, my work has been about, and a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is that different approaches to conventional sustainability, or what we've been told as is sustainability in the West, are needed. And I feel like, well, we know the data's there that there's a lot of sustainability initiatives happening within most fields, except not enough change is happening. And so my frustration with this has led me to this work. And so material choices alone are not solving sustainability issues. So changing materials, processes, I believe, isn't enough. And as I was saying before, I could always sense that there was something more. And this more is this work that I've been exploring now. And I want to introduce you to some of these ideas. At this. Okay. So there's many. So at the moment, most sustainability changes are happening at the bottom, so at the product level, which is the black circle. And so we are living in this crisis of unsustainability, of exploitation, extraction in the world, and that's permeating out into all of our fields that we work in and engage with. And really, I think this is happening because we've lost this relational nature with all life on this planet. And it's this consciousness of separation that really is not allowing us to see how everything's connected and to create change from that level. So we've got the product level of change, which is where we see most things happening. And then we have a little bit of change happening in the system phase. And then the paradigm level of change, the purple circle, is where I'm arguing that we need to put more emphasis on, which is where my work sits and what we're going to be going through today. And so this is a really helpful meta design model diagram by Matilda Tham, who's a sustainable design professor in Finland. And you can tell that all of these kind of levels are nested within each other, and the paradigm level of change, which was it's been articulated by several people, but Donella Meadows, who was an environmentalist, emphasized that although paradigms are the most difficult to intervene in a system, because it's actually about changing the worldviews, and from the worldviews, that's where our actions and our thoughts and our behaviors, and then obviously how we make things emerge from, that is the hardest place to make change, but it's also potentially the most transformative for the long term. So really this shift requires re-examining how we be in the world and these knowledge structures and practices that we engage with every day for making, or whatever your field is, however you're interacting with it and contributing to the world, and moving more towards relational, ecological, place-based, and holistic approaches. And this can actually expand our visions, and how we interact and create in the world. So for me, sustainability has to have these 5. And even though this is illustrated through these 5 different elements, they are very much interweaving with each other. So on the outskirts, we've got future generations. So how are future generations being impacted by what you're sharing, and someone by what you're creating? And someone shared in the chat before about future generations. So how is what you're making, or how you're making it actually going to contribute future generations to come? And I argue that it's not just future human generations, but also more than human generations. How is the earth going to feel the effects of what you're creating and what you're doing now, 7 generations to come? Goes it, in from that one, which is the green one. And so this is about earth. So the earth and all of the communities that exist on the earth, how is what you're creating and doing in the world being impacted by that? And then we've got community. How are communities being impacted by what you're creating and how you're being in the world? And then we've got your creations. So how is what you're making, how is what you're interacting with, how is what you're creating, whether it is a physical thing or whether it is a digital, and nowadays a lot of it is digital. How is that being impacted by your processes, by your choices? And then of course you've got yourself in the middle. So I see this a lot. So a lot of sustainability rhetoric always forgets the sustainability of the self. So how are we treating ourselves? If you're just, just working and completely disregarding the wisdom of your body, taking rest and disregarding what your body needs just so you can keep working towards sustainability, is it really sustainable? I would argue not. So I feel the sustainability of the self is often one that gets forgotten. Additionally, on top of this, I believe there has to be these 4 knowledge and wisdom centers that are activated when we're working towards sustainability. And in the Western world, it's mainly the intellectual mind realm that we're operating within. And we need the intellectual. However, it's been very much overvalued. And so we also have this heart element, which is the emotional body, which also gives us a lot of wisdom. We have the physical body, which carries intuition, which carries attunement to the world around us. It carries sensing into the world around us on what we're doing and how we're being in the world. And then of course we've got the spirit element. So that's the unseen. That's that to me, that I define spirit, and this is going to be different for everybody, of course, as that interconnecting thread of life, that life force that permeates through everything. Again, it's hard to put into words. It's more of a felt, tuned into sensation. So in through my research, and just weary of time because there's so much we could really go into, and I would like to get into some practices. Um, in my research, which was focused on pluriversality, so this idea that many worlds can exist and coexist, and they have for a long time, they've just been pushed aside through modern colonial ways of being. I found that there was these 4 underlying grounding, we call them philosophies, of relationality, place, autonomies, and wholeness. And these are the grounding values that I like to look at sustainability through. And so I'm going to be taking you through some of practices that relate to connecting to some of these values within your work. We won't get time to go through all of them, but we'll just do a few. Again, this work is never ending. There's so many places like this. So we'll begin with place because we already, and this idea of place, which often gets forgotten about, beyond perhaps a land acknowledgement at the beginning of something. But connection to place as well as context is pivotal, and recognizing each locality. So, where we're located, where we're creating, where we're making, and the diversity and richness and aliveness that exists in that place and how that informs our work is vital. And we can actually start to co create um, with these relations once we start connecting into them. And so place moves beyond the physical significance. So place isn't just the physical physicality, even though that's an important element, but there also needs to be a recognition that there's a spiritual, emotional, and intellectual realm that is connected to place. And all of these can influence your work, and you can co create with these aspects. So, the richness, diversity, and collaborative nature of places is rarely acknowledged, as I said, in many of our fields. And without the earth holding us each day, as I've already mentioned, none of this would be possible. So, place could be this vital collaborator in our creativity and in our work once we're able to start listening, once we're able to start attuning and sensing into the places that we inhabit. And this goes for both more nature based landscapes, but also urban scapes as well. Many of us reside in urban spaces, I do. And you can absolutely connect to place wherever you are. And so the modern Western tendency detaches significance from place, and that's kind of been the project of globalization that has tried to homogenize a lot of places. And so a reconnection to where we're located can actually like not only connect us to the land, but also can help us connect to this idea of relationalities, which I'll be going into shortly. So various practices like sitting, observing, listening, walking, meditating in place, sensing into spaces, taking your work out into place, um, if you have access to outdoor spaces, is a really good way to start attuning into your environment. So Arturo Escobar, who's a Colombian anthropologist, poses this critical question, which I think is really interesting. And he says, how do we move beyond occupying spaces toward actually co-inhabiting places? So beyond occupying spaces toward co-inhabiting places. And a lot of my work has really been about exploring this. How do we come into a more co-creative, collaborative relationship with the world around us? And of course, not to forget, many of us, well, all of us are on colonized lands. It was just a matter of time when that colonization happened, but colonization, depending how far back it was. So I'm from Australia, and it was quite recent. And so there's a lot of complexities that come with place and histories that, of course, we also need to be sensitive to. So, one practice that I'd love to take you through is a really simple exercise of learning how to locate ourselves and connect to place. And the most powerful um, way that I've come across, and I'm so grateful to my teachers for teaching me this, is to build a connection with the four elements and the four directions. And so the four, like locating ourselves within the four directions. So that's north, east, south, west, wherever wherever we go. So wherever we live and wherever we're working, it actually can help us ground into our locality wherever we are, wherever you're traveling around the world. And so each direction is associated with a different element. So north is associated with water, east is associated with the element of air, south is associated with the element of fire, west is associated with the element of earth, and different traditions might add on another element or two, but we're just going to keep it to 4 for this. And so, how are we relating to these elements and directions? Do we know where the directions are wherever we go? And what I find really interesting is that all of these 4 elements are what makes up all of matter. So, everything that we have in front of us, or if you're a creator and you're making, it's all composed of these 4 elements in some form throughout its life cycle. And if you look at the etymology of the word matter, it comes from the Latin word that means mother, which is really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. So so everyone, I assume, has a compass on their phone. Love for everyone to get their phone out and work out where north, south, east, and west is where you are right now. And iPhone, and I think other phones will have it too. You can go to the Compass app and it will tell you where each of these locations are where you are right now. You might just need to play with it a bit to get it right. North is, where east is, where south is, where west is. And once you've done that, and this might be for doing a little bit later if you're not at home. I can see some of you are in office spaces. But what you can actually do is you can find something in your home that represents each of these elements. So for water, you could get a bowl of water. For air, you could get a feather or some incense. For fire, you could get a candle. And for earth, you could get a plant or a flower or a rock, and place those objects in those parts. Once you've worked out with your compass where north is, south, east, west, and you can place something in each of those parts and say a little hello to it every day. Acknowledging each of these 4 directions every day. Just a little hello. And this actually starts to do is it starts to build a sensitivity and an attunement to where you are and where you're located, because the 4 directions and these 4 elements are as old as time. So all cultures have been relating to these elements to locate themselves in place. So this is a really simple but also really powerful way to start locating yourself in place. And this moves beyond any sort of arguments around appropriation and so on, because it's beyond culture. An exercise that you might want to do to take this even further, and we're not going to have time to do it today, but I'll just briefly share it for anyone that's interested, is then you can start to think about how these elements show up in your creative work. For example, how might you contemplate how water shows up in your work? Perhaps you're working with fabrics. How much water might it have taken for that fabric to be created? Again, you probably don't know the exact answer, but how can you start tuning into, okay, water was part of the creation of this fabric, or perhaps looking at it in another way, perhaps there's something that you really need to let go of in your work. There's perhaps a thought or a belief that you're done with. It's time to let it go. How can fire help burn that away, metaphorically, to make space for the new? So we can start to work with these elements to support us in a co-creative way. So moving on, I'm going to look at this idea of autonomies. And hi, Kimberly, how are you? Welcome. And this idea of autonomies and why it's important, how it relates to what we're doing in the world. Um, and this idea of autonomies or sovereignty, which they're very closely related, is about moving beyond how we've been told things need to be. And we all work within these systems that have been constructed through different rules and different belief structures and practices that have told us that there are particular ways to be in the world. And what autonomies allows us to do is to break away from that a little bit and connect into our own authenticity and our own way of doing things, both at the individual and at the communal level. So this isn't just about hyper individualism. It's also autonomies relates to communities, so autonomous communities. Um, and we need to really recognize how a lot of the systems that we're in have, like, we've been conditioned into them, and we've been told that things are need to be done a certain way, but in reality there is much more openness. And I do believe if we are going to bring forth the sustainable worlds that many of our hearts are really dreaming of, then we need to start questioning, deconditioning from these beliefs and structures, and envisioning and enacting something different. So, so does this work does not happen overnight. It's deep and it's long term, and it's challenging, which I feel is also a reason why it sits at the paradigm level of change, and not many people are addressing it in corporate sustainability spaces. Um, I'm going to take you through a practice that will help you connect into your authentic energies, which you can then use for anything. And so this is an energy hygiene practice. And what that means is we're going to be connecting into our authentic energies. So then you can do this. I do this exercise in the morning, in the evening, before creating, or if I'm feeling like a little unbalanced or ungrounded and just a bit disconnected from myself. And because we're moving around through so many places and spaces, interacting with so many people every day in so many different ways, we can unconsciously pick up lots of other energies that will um, kind of contribute to um, how do I put this? Will kind of glaze over our own authentic energies. And so, if we want to start living and really connecting into our authentic way of creating, our own authentic way of working, our own authentic way of living in the world, we need to be in our own clean energy. So, I'm going to invite you all to close down your eyes. And if you feel more comfortable, you're welcome to have your camera off. But yeah, most of you do. And I'm just gonna take 3 deep breaths. Just connecting into your body, into yourself. 3 deep breaths. And I want you to imagine that there's a thick cord in a bright green light that's connected from your base to from your tailbone, and it connects it down deep into the core of the earth. So this is a cord that grounds you into the earth. And so imagine it, this green cord coming from your base into deep, deep, deep core of the earth. My to visualize from your stomach, so that's like the solar plexus area, a white light stomach area connected up high into the cosmos. And so connected high up into the clouds, into the sky. So grounded in deep with the earth holding you and the sky holding you. You can welcome in any of your ancestors, any of your guides, any past loved ones or pets, anyone that you feel supports you in any way. Now we're grounded in deep with the earth. We're connected to the cosmos. I'm going to imagine now like a vacuum that starts sucking out of your energy field any energies that you've picked up that are not yours or that are not needed to be in your space. So just imagining this vacuum sucking out these energies that are not yours, that are not for you to hold anymore. And whatever the vacuum is sucking out is getting composted into the earth. Little moment here. It's clearing out what's no longer needed to be in your space. Feel like the vacuum is full and it's done, and the earth has taken whatever's no longer needed for you to carry. Imagining a large sun above your head. Is calling back all of your own energies that maybe you've left scattered around wherever you've been today, or whoever you've interacted with, or whatever you've been doing. Just allowing the sun to recall back your own energy. Now that you've cleaned out and called back your own energy and you're grounded and connected, just closing up your field, which is approximately like 2 meters circumference around you, just closing it up in whatever light color you'd like to, just imagining a light around you. And just knowing that you can do this practice multiple times a day. I do. Whenever you're feeling maybe a little disconnected, ungrounded, you're feeling like maybe you've been somewhere in a space or had an interaction with someone that left you feeling a bit icky, and always clean that out and then just come back into yourself. And I invite you to try that and then create or do something from that place and see if it feels any different. Perhaps I find for me it really is very supportive in um, when I'm navigating around and just centering me back into myself. And we'll do a little exercise after that builds on this, which where you'll take it a little bit further. So I want to move on to this idea of relationality, and which I'm sure some of you have heard about already. And share my screen again. And this concept, well, it's more than a concept, it's a way of being in the world that all of our ancestors, no matter where you're from, used to live before um, coloniality took them over. And Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's an indigenous woman, and she's also a scientist and an ecologist here in the States. She asked this question, what can I give in return for the gifts of the earth? And I've always thinking of this, and I believe that one of the things that we can give back is starting to tune into this idea, this forgotten idea of relationality and how everything is interconnected, and how that as humans, we are only one part of the web of life. We're not the part of the web of life. And so a lot of my work now is exploring these different ideas on how do we shift our worldview from being human centric, which is what most of us, unless you've had a very progressive upbringing, then that's amazing. Um, how do we shift this worldview from being human centric to being all life centric? How do we do that? And I think it's in these little simple practices that get us connecting into different um, parts of our processes and our fields in more alive ways that can help us engage with this idea. So I wanted to share a quick story about this that really um, blew me away. And maybe some of you already know about this story, and it's based on there was this eco-philosopher in Australia named Val Plumwood, and some of you may know of her work. And she's passed now, but she was a prominent professor in Australia. And in the 70s, I think it was the 70s or the 80s, she was canoeing, kayaking in the Northern Territory, which is up at the top of Australia, and it had just rained. And her kayak got knocked over by a crocodile. And so, what always happens first is the crocodile will try and drown you before they eat you. And so, the crocodile was trying to drown her, trying to drown her, trying to drown her. And she thought, this is it, I'm done. And for 1 second, the crocodile managed to let her go. And she managed to escape onto the banks and by some miracle, and she didn't lose any limbs, and it completely changed her whole perspective on her work. And she realized that at that time, at that moment, that she was the food for the crocodile, that she was just part of the food chain, and that really, as humans, we have this idea that we're at the top, we're at the pinnacle, but actually we're just part of the web, and that um, I really love this story because it puts things into in a very kind of extreme way, puts things into perspectives. And a lot of my research has been about how can we move into a relational way of engaging with materials, tools, and processes and creating dialogues with them that move beyond this very controlling, human centric way of engaging with creativity to how do we make it a co creation, a collaboration. And what helps with this is observing the world through relations, not objects, but relations. And there's this idea of animism, which I'm sure many of you have heard, that this idea that everything is alive, and just even playing with this idea, because sometimes it can be a lot for our minds to even fathom that everything is alive, can really start to shift your practices. And so I wanted to build on the energy hygiene practice we just did. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through a practice, which again will be with the eyes closed and going inward, on how you can start to relate to whether it's your creative practice or it could be a particular project you're working on. It could be your business um, in a relational way. So again, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes down. And now that you're connected to your own energy, you're connected to where you are. Also, I want you to imagine that there's a golden thread that's connecting us all here together. Everyone that's on this call, but also everyone that's watching the replay. Sensing into the fact that we're always interconnected no matter where we are in the world, and how lucky we are to get to connect in from so many places here today. Um, so I want you to think about a project you're working on at the moment, or it could be, yeah, a creative project or a work project or a business. And I want you to imagine that whatever that is, sitting outside of your space. So remember we created a like 2 by 2 meter bubble around us. So imagine this project sitting outside of your space. And I want you to start sensing into it. What does it look like? Perhaps it has a particular color or a particular scent. Does it have any textures? Feel like? And just starting to sense into that project, whatever it is that you've chosen. Say hello to it in whatever way you'd like to. this is the first time you've interacted with your project in this way. So, how do you want to introduce yourself? So, even though we are creating these projects, these things in the world, I do believe that it is a co creation and this project has its own life as well. So, it's not just you. So, how do you introduce yourself to it? How do you say hello? And I want you to think about a question that you have, or perhaps you have an issue or a challenge at the moment with this project. I want you to ask your project some advice on how to navigate this challenge or this query that you have. And usually, this you don't need to overthink this. Just the first thing that pops up in your mind is usually it. It's when we start to overthink this that we get a little bit in our heads about it. What does your project want to tell you? What advice would it like to give you based on your question? And just another few seconds here. way to thank your project for the advice they've given you today. Back into your body. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Anyone wants to share in the chat how that was for them? How was that experience for you? Oh, wow. Gentle to start meeting both a snake and a dragon. That sounds like some pretty potent message. Yeah, so this exercise, ah, no worries, Lana. Oh, thanks. This exercise you can do with any of your projects, but also I've done it before with different materials, asking them how they want to be co-created with. I've done it before with, um, you know, just a project I'm working on and asking it, where do you want to go with this? How do you want to be collaborated with? How do you want to, um, what do you want to be made into? And sometimes these exercises can seem quite silly and absurd and almost like our minds are making things up, but what we're actually doing is starting to attune and sense into different ways of being, particularly relational ways of being. And so sensing into what you're creating and its processes and materials and tools, whatever you're engaging with, and just starting to play and experiment with these aspects as alive can really start to shift things. And what is also happening in a through a more scientific explanation, I guess, is we're cutting like the neural pathways of the way we've always done things and the way we've always looked at things to kind of like disrupting the neuro pathways, and that's creating space and expansion for other ideas and for other ways to come through and for us to relate to. And again, this isn't like it's a very simple, but it's not an easy exercise for our minds to get around at the beginning, particularly. You can do this with anything and it can become really, really fun. I, I've sat in different um, communications with different things beyond just my creative works. I've done this with money. I've done this with um, my business. I've done this with many other aspects, giving life and giving voice. And again, sometimes it's hard to separate, is this just my projection? Is this just my projection? And what I want to hear. But I feel like once you keep using this muscle and your sensing and attunement gets louder, you might be surprised with what emerges. Okay, so moving on, if everyone's okay to keep going, I'm gonna have a little think about this same creative project that you're working on, and we'll keep this on the last exercise. And so I want you to think about um, this creative project you just had a little chat with, and what we little mapping activity. And you can do this on your phone, or you can do this on your on a piece of paper and a pen. And I want you to start to think about and write down all of the relations that are involved in the creation of this project that you're working on, or your business, or whatever it was that you got into relation with. And I want you to think about and write down all of the as many relations as you can for the next 5 minutes. So you should think about the earth elements, of course, any supply chain, ecosystems that are involved, humans, more than humans. So by more than humans, I mean um, fungi, insects, atmospheres, could be ancestors, future generations to come, and so on and so on. So the invisible realms and anything else that is supported in the past, but also is supporting this project for you. So just 5 minutes to write down just a list of everything and everyone that is supporting your current project that you just got into relationship with. Thank you so much, Anastasia. Bye. Thanks for coming. few minutes to pop down at all the relations that you think are supporting this project. And again, I invite you to move beyond just what we usually think of, which is the human world. So, how are the earth elements supporting your work? Perhaps there's some particular ancestors of the land that you're on that are in support, or future generations, networks. Get really fine detailed with this, even to the point where you're including the chair that you're sitting on right now that's supporting you to sit. But just put whatever you feel is important for you. And again, try the obvious and the visible. When you have this list, I would invite you to create a visual that presents these interconnections. And we're not going to have time to finish that off today, but maybe that's something that you can just start doodling on. Presents that represents to you these interconnections the ecology of your project is to show you and to remind us, because I feel like we often forget within our work, within our creative practices, particularly if you're trying to walk a path that not everyone alone, and we can feel a little bit disconnected and sometimes unmotivated. And this ecology of your project shows you that actually we're never alone, even though sometimes we might crave human interaction. Always supporting us. And I love to remind myself of this when I have those moments of despair. And we can actually ask for support from this ecology, from this project ecology. So just like we were in relationship with our project before, we can start to tune in this community of support that we have, which is human and more than human. So I invite you to, again, we're not going to have time to do it now, but maybe that's something that you want to build on later on and do a little illustration. I'll love to see if anyone does that. Um, and it's something you can keep adding to. And again, what we're doing here is we're attuning, and building that muscle of of looking beyond the human, of looking beyond a human centric approach to a life centric approach. Okay, so I'm gonna start to close up as we're at 90 minutes almost, and I know it's very, very late for some of you. Uh, And I wanted to share that again, as I've mentioned, what we're doing here is we're learning to build a different way of seeing in the world and relating to the world. And sometimes these practices might seem unrelevant to sustainability, to our creative projects. But what this is doing is it's creating a different groundwork for our creations to move up from. Certainly has allowed me more rejuvenation, more nourishment, a greater trust in myself, my processes, greater ability to connect to my authenticity and my own rhythms. And of course, I feel like more ability to see like different perspectives, more flow, more connection. So like alive, interconnected, attuned ways of seeing into the world, and then starting to integrate them into our practices and our daily lives. Again, in small ways, because I personally believe that sustainability is not this solution driven, we're going to plaster on this or this solution and that's going to be it. It has to be lived in the everyday. Sustainability, regenerative practices have to be lived in the everyday. And how do we do that? Through small, everyday, intentional practices. So we are going to close up here. And this was just a really quick 90-minute workshop to introduce you to some of these ideas in deeper ways. And what I am, oops. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be moving these ideas into like a 6-week container which I'll be starting at the end of this month and going deeper into these ideas and concepts and practices. I'm really passionate about moving learning containers outside of the academic space. So we're going to be co-creating an exploratory lab where we'll be looking into these ways of being and processes and methods in a deeper way. So I'll be sending out an email to that to everyone that subscribed. So just to finish up, thank you so much everyone for coming. Let's just close our eyes for another little bit and just finding a way to thank each other, this interconnecting thread that connects us all from wherever we are in the world today, and as well as all the people that are going to watch this recording.